We start with the Hardys sword fighting a bunch of fencers while spouting one-liners. Frank and Joe win the battle by tapping their swords together, which electrocutes everyone in the room. The book gives us no explanation for this, besides the standard, it's a fancy ATAC gadget. Sorry, but I have to question this. ATAC gave them electrical swords for a fencing competition. How did they not accidentally kill someone with these?
Argo Funk Book Review, Argo Funk Book Review.
Frank is in a swimming competition. Brian Conrad is there. Brian Conrad is always there. He beats Frank in the competition, teases him, and we never see Brian in the book again. Good job, Brian. ATAC gives the Hardys their next mission by burying it in the Hardys' backyard. It gets found by some workmen, who give it to Aunt Trucy, who gives it to Frank and Joe. Again, I'm forced to wonder why ATAC chooses to contact their agents through such a roundabout manner instead of sending someone a secured email. The mission is to work on a fishing boat in Maine. 3 boats have sunk over the past few years. Frank and Joe's job is to pose as workmen and figure out why these fishing boats keep sinking. As we'll soon learn, it's because the boat is a death trap. When the Hardys start to board, a runaway forklift comes barreling towards them. The Hardys make a ramp onto the ship so the forklift can completely ignore the laws of physics and go flying through the air over the ship. Then we get one page to meet all the other characters. Cappy, the Shank, Stan Wall, Ronnie Workman, and Ol' Man. Then they almost crash into another boat. Joe saves them by dropping the anchor. The culprit retaliates by pushing Joe overboard. Luckily, Joe has a turtleneck sweater that doubles as a wetsuit. I guess that's a useful gadget, but unless it's a full-body sweater, he should still die from hypothermia. Frank ices off the deck when he notices some chum on the ground. A nearby shark decides to completely ignore the laws of physics, so it jumps 10 feet into the air to land on board and eat the chum. Joe grabs an oar and hits the shark in the face, knocking it unconscious. Needless to say, this entire scene was ridiculous. The culprit rigs the exhaust system to explode. I'm not sure how they fixed the situation, because the sound effects completely block the dialogue balloons. Seriously, how do you mess up your book's formatting that badly? Or did the editors decide the dialogue was so bad it needed to be covered up? Either way, weirdest moment of the book. Cappy and Ronnie talk for 2 pages about who owns the boat, and I kid you not, this is the only part of the book where one of the suspects gets any kind of development. Everything else is death sequences and the Hardys talking to each other. It almost feels like the plot is non-existent. The Hardys look for the Shank below decks, where they find the Shank has been murdered. The culprit also attacks Stan in the cargo hold. The Hardys search the hold, where the culprit locks the door and fills it with bilge water. The Hardys escape by opening an emergency drain. Hidden in the hold, the Hardys find a bunch of cocaine. Cappy appears with a gun. He says his plan was to sell the cocaine and destroy the boat, along with everybody else on board. Okay, so if you haven't sold the cocaine yet, why have you already tried to destroy the boat multiple times? If you destroy the boat, you lose your cocaine and don't get any money. Culprit foils their own plot. Joe purposely falls overboard as a distraction so Frank can beat up the culprit. Joe avoids falling into the ocean a second time using his magnetic belt. I wonder why he didn't use that when he fell overboard earlier. Too busy showing off his turtleneck sweater, I guess. Ol' Man captures the culprit in a net, and Ronnie inherits the boat. In the final chapter, Frank's swimming improves, but he still lost the competition because he and Frank were out of town for the fishing trip. This leads to awkward questions of how the Hardys are able to skip school so often without anyone noticing. But the book decides to ignore that in favor of a joke about fish. Ha ha! Fish. The end. Post-book follow-up. This is a bad book, and it barely qualifies as a mystery. There's almost no story or character development. It's just an excuse to put the Hardys in a bunch of death sequences. And while death sequences are interesting, half of them involve breaking the laws of physics. And half of them involve the Hardys escaping with an imaginary gadget that's never been mentioned before. When the Shank was killed halfway through the book, I sighed in frustration. This is the 3rd book in a row where they've tried to shake things up by killing someone halfway through. It doesn't work when every book has the exact same plot twist at the exact same part of the book. Also, we never got to meet the Shank. His death would have had more of an effect if we met him before he died. In my last review, I kind of complained about line consistency with the art. I think I figured out what the problem is. Let me illustrate with a picture from Trapped in a Soap Opera. See how one character has thick lines while the other character has thin lines? It's because the pictures were originally drawn at different sizes, and they were later resized to be the exact same height. It doesn't happen as often here as it did in previous books, but it's still jarring when the characters morph into sloppier, thick-lined close-ups. Overall, I would not recommend this book to anyone unless you're a fan of death-defying action sequences. The shark attack was pretty cool, but one cool moment doesn't make up for a mystery book whose story isn't even trying. I give Hardy Boys Undercover Brothers number 5, See You, See Me, a 1 out of 10.